I'm Bob Riggio. With me is Dan King, Chief Warrant Officer, who was a helicopter pilot back during the days of Vietnam. And the purpose of these interviews is rather simple. We just want to recognize our veterans, and we have many veterans that live in the Black Hills area that dedicated a portion of their lives for the service to our country. And Dan is one of those veterans, and this gives us an opportunity to thank our veterans and to acknowledge the service that they provided this country.
Okay, so first of all, I'm from the Northwest. Graduated from Gresham High School outside of Portland, 1967. I was going to Multnomah Community College, and a good friend of mine whose father was on the draft board, he came to me and he said that his dad told him that my number was going to be up.
Did you know your number at that time?
I did. I ran down, I immediately tried to sign up with the Navy SEALs. I was a swimmer, competitive swimmer. And
makes sense. Swimmer, SEALs?
Yeah, I'd read about them and so forth, and it seemed like something, but believe it or not, I didn't make it. And the physical requirements were even beyond, unreal. At the same time, somebody had told me about the Warrant Officer Flight Training Program. I signed up for it, but the problem is that program, they had typically in Oregon, they had 30,000 people sign up for it, and they only selected 9 per month for it.
Out of 30,000, only
yes,
9?
9.
And what was your education at that time?
Just high school with about a couple semesters of college.
Oh.
For some reason, I was selected to go through the physical. I did a written test, which I maxed.
Out of the 30,000, you were one of the 9?
One of the 9 that was selected. I had no flight background. I'd only been on an airplane once in my life at that time. I had a lot of respect for the Marines, but I did not want to be a Marine. And so I thought that I'd rather have control over my own life. And after I was selected, they had me on a plane down to Louisiana. I went through Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. Then I went to Fort Walters, Texas for a warrant officer school, which was 6 weeks, 5 months for primary aviation training. With the helicopters, it's hard to describe this, but helicopters are something that you either have a natural ability to fly or you don't. There's a lot of great fixed-wing pilots that get in helicopters and never succeed in flying them. And it's just a quirk of nature that you're able to do it. And
I would think a lot of hand-eye coordination
hand-eye coordination.
Extremely important.
Everything is from the seat of the pants.
Right.
And basically, just imagine standing on a bubble, and you're trying to keep that bubble from going, and now pick it up off the ground, and now So once we got through this 6 weeks of intense warrant officer school, they put us into that aircraft. In my case, it was the OH-13, the MASH helicopters. Basically, we had 10 hours to solo, and if you didn't solo after 10 hours,
you're out.
You're out. At some point, it's sort of like I said, you either can do it or you can't. There's no in between. You can have all the training in the world, and you may never be able to actually fly a helicopter. Then you go into primary, and that's where we were introduced to Hueys, the UH-1s. And
now the Hueys was a primary helicopter used in Vietnam.
That was the primary helicopter for the U.S. Army, yeah. In Vietnam, all I ever did was fly low level. I've got a couple thousand hours flying no more than under 100 feet and above 50 feet. Every time I went above 1,000 feet, I got a little
nosebleed.
Yeah. But that's just the way it was in Vietnam, because at the altitude you were a prime target.
Yeah.
If you were flying 50 feet above the ground,
how fast were you flying at 50 feet above?
Well, Huey's the maximum that a D or H model Huey could go safely is about 87 knots. And so that's about 120 miles an hour.
You're a hard target to shoot at.
Very hard, yeah. And if you're on the ground and you hear a Huey coming, the noise that the Huey makes, the famous wop, 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 wop noise, that's because the end of the blade's going the speed of sound.
When you got your orders to go to Vietnam, were you pretty much gung-ho, ready to show the Viet Cong what you were trained to do?
I never thought of it that way, but I was more like, I want to do the job. I'd just been through this horrendous 9 months of intensive training, the most intensive training you can imagine. I made it through that, and now I get a chance to get in that helicopter and go do what they're asking me to do. And I never really thought of it as, these guys over here, bad guys or whatever. Sure. It's more like, You know, they'd say, okay, pick these guys up, take them over here and drop them off or whatever. Now that changed a little bit when I got into gunships. Then we were actively going out and trying to find the bad guys.
Okay, so when you first got to Vietnam, what was your specialty then?
Just basically slick pilot, combat assaults, picking up the troops. In this case, it was the 9th Infantry Division. All the troops are lined up on a road, and the helicopters come in, usually 9 of us. The ground troops are split up into squads, and they get on each of the helicopters, and the helicopters take off in formation with all these ground troops in each one of the helicopters, and we fly low level out to what we call a landing zone, an LZ. And the landing zone is picked out by a command and control, usually a senior aviation officer and a senior ground officer, and they'll say, okay, we think the enemy's over here, there's a nice big field here, and we want you to come in and land and drop those troops off in the field. The only trouble is that many times the enemy was waiting and they started shooting when you went in and landed. So what happened is that the gunships would come in and they would fire minigun and rockets on both sides of the landing zone and try to get the enemy's head down. And while they were doing that, we would come in and land. Usually we'd never actually touch the ground.
No.
We'd just come into a low hover. The troops would jump out and immediately hit the dirt. And as soon as that last troop was out, the guy at the back end of the formation would say, all out, and the lead would pull off and we would all pull off as a group.